The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
Welcome back to the Reign of Books podcast, the reader's entry into great narratives where the written page reigns supreme all the time, always here on this podcast. I'm John Keeler, joining you from the War Room. My co-host is Josh Preston, joining you from the Hyrule Cube. And we are on episode number 14, and we have started the Wheel of Time series. The first book is The Eye of the World. This is by Robert Jordan, epic fantasy series. Josh, today's show is brought to you by TLR Exterminators, Tamland Rand. It's that time of year, the cold season. Trollocs want in, but you want them out. Send a carrier pigeon to TLR today and speak with a representative. Testimonials include, every morning when I would turn on my kitchen light, Trollocs would scatter everywhere. I trust a TLR exterminator to take care of my problem. Contact TLR today if you have a Trolloc problem. Don't get caught up depending on one of those other exterminator services like Aes Sedai, Sedai? Don't depend on them and their walls of fire. And Josh, TLR is veteran-owned and operated. Each member has fought in the global war against the Dark One. TLR Exterminators, Tamland Rand, make the Trollocs get out! And we are proud to have TLR Exterminators as our sponsor for this podcast today. Josh, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, John. I'm doing great. It's been a great reading week and a great week interacting with some fans. You know, I had a fun discussion on the Goodreads forum about Hyperion, one of our new all-time sci-fi reads, which you can check out on the podcast. And there was a discussion about what planet would you live on in the Hyperion universe. Someone brought up having a single bathroom in their house built on a floating raft in the middle of the ocean. If you remember, the Farcasters could teleport you anywhere. So having that floating bathroom, which one of the characters did, and what horrible luck it would be if the Farcaster broke and you were on the toilet on a floating raft in the middle of the ocean. Bad timing, especially if you ran out of toilet paper.
Yeah, especially if it was one of those middle-of-the-night things and you weren't really dressed either.
Double whammy. You know, and we did just come off of Hyperion, which really captured our imaginations, John, so much. And I was more than a little afraid that our next book couldn't draw us in as deeply, or we would keep making mental comparisons to Hyperion moving forward. But you know what? I think that's the case a lot, right? You fall in love with certain stories, and then you set those stories as benchmarks. And you know, like you said, we are entering The Eye of the World, a book that has a series that has a huge legion of fans. It was written over a 2.5-decade period. And there are 14 books that tell this whole saga. But I am so excited because this is like a new pop culture experience for me. You know, we all grew up with the big movies, the sci-fi movies, Star Wars, Star Trek, fantasy movies like Legend, and then Beastmaster. And my childhood favorite, I'll admit, is The Neverending Story.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, this book, it's a series that's as important to the fantasy ethos as any big Hollywood movie. So jumping into the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and concluded by Brandon Sanderson last year, we're going to give our own take on it. It's a genre-defining story, and we're going to discuss it from the very beginning when Rand al'Thor crosses the countryside with his dad in a winter that seemingly never ends. But before we actually jump into this long journey, which is long for the characters and for the reader, let's look at the news headlines in fiction and publishing. The first story, John, is Top Writing Tools of Famous Authors. This is another little infographic from our friends at, I think, Ninja Bootcamp or some Ninja Essays. There's a lot of infographic companies out there. But Writing Tools of Famous Authors, George R.R. Martin. He still does all his writing on an old DOS machine running WordStar 4.0. The Duesenberg of word processing software, which I'm pretty savvy technically wise, and I've never heard of that. Neil Gaiman, of course, uses a fountain pen, and he's got a choice selection of fountain pens. We'll put those in the show notes. J.K. Rowling has a killer loose leaf paper matrix. Literally, it's just basically pen and paper and scribblings, loose leaf. How did she ever keep track of everything with that system? Agatha Christie preferred writing on a Regimen home portable #2 machine, good old typewriter. And so did Danielle Steele, Stephen King, Mr. Fountain Pen, and Quentin Tarantino. Huge notebook, red and black pens. He's the screenplay director of Pulp Fiction, if you're not aware. And Mark Twain actually did his own leather-bound notebooks. So nothing like groundbreaking, John, but still interesting to see this little infographic. And George R. R. Martin, that guy kills me. He's still at the beginning of the computing era with his DOS machine.
Yeah. I wonder if Robert Jordan drew his map before he started his story. I wouldn't have been able to figure out where these characters were going if I hadn't drawn a map. I mean, if I didn't have this map in the story while I was reading, I wouldn't know what was going on.
Good point. You cannot make a map with a typewriter.
All right, moving on to our next story. Story time from space. Basically, the astronauts launched with some books, and this is a short story. They launched with several books, and they're not broadcasting back to Earth, but they're Skyping, I guess, whatever they do, into some classrooms and reading to families and parents and kids and things like that. I think that would be really cool if I was still in elementary school and I had an astronaut read to me from outer space. But the point of this is that they're getting kids interested in reading and science. And not necessarily science fiction, but it is really important that we keep our kids interested in science so we can keep moving ahead. So I think it's a great idea they got astronauts involved with this, and that's it. Just a quick short story. There was a lot more to it, but that was the gist of it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. We're in the digital publishing age, so I don't know who's sponsoring this, NASA, privateers, but basically, yeah, as long as they have a good background and they're floating while they're reading, background of Earth, the moon, a comet, and they're reading, make it interesting. Have some high production values. I say that tongue in cheek, but make it interesting and kind of awe-inspiring, and not the same guy coming from his space chair every time they read a story. So just
not from his cycling machine while he's trying to exercise to maintain some bone mass up there.
Yeah, he's got to get that done, but no shortchanging the kids. We want to see some stars and some cool stuff. And the last story comes from IO9. It's a news website that comes from the future. That is their tagline. It's a story on how to find the best new science fiction and fantasy stories. This is exactly what we've been looking for. How do you actually cull through all the mass number of stories that are out there, especially with the explosion in digital publishing? And the story is just interesting because it is an editor who compiles an edition called The Best Science Fiction and Fantasy. It's in volume 8 right now. And he is an award-winning editor, Jonathan Strahan. And basically he talks about, with the advent of the internet, it went from a few well-established venues to, trying to find everywhere that writing now exists, and how that has made it a year-long process to find the best short fiction. But the interesting part of the story is how he talks about his decision process. What qualifies. It's those stories that capture your imagination, the ones that you can remember long after you finish reading them, the ones where the characters and the things in the story that just touch you at a an instinctive level, that make you think this is the genre. And he goes, and he goes through his whole process of editing and rereading the stories no less than 4 times, and then having debates with peers, good social dialogues like this, talking about their favorite stuff. So it was a really cool little story, and I'm going to actually take a look at this edition that he writes of Best Science Fiction and Fantasy Stories, Volume 8, coming out, I think, in stores right now. And that wraps up the news, because Johnny's just awestruck. I think he's trying to buy it right now. He's on Amazon looking for it right now. But we are going to jump into this story tonight or this morning, wherever you are. This is a big, big podcast for me. Starting the Wheel of Time, immersing myself in it. Even though I don't know if it's going to be my next great pop culture experience in fantasy, I'm not there yet, John. I'm virtually brand new to this to the series. I'm coming in without any preconceived notions. I did not spoil anything for myself. There's a ton of there's a ton of lovers, legions of fans, a ton of haters. Everybody across the spectrum, of course, with something this big, everybody has an opinion. I came into this wanting just to read a good story. That's what we do here. So basically, I am already invested in the bigger world, the characters who fill it. I do care about the men and women here. Lots of women protagonists, and this is really interesting. It's complex, vivid, heart-stopping, funny, just really good this first third. So, what about you, John?
Here's my quick history with this. I read The Eye of the World, and this is the only book that I've read in the Robert Jordan series. And that was way back in high school. So I mean, it's been years and years and years. I remember a couple of details from the book. But, of course, now that I've read the first third of it again, I remember why I was so excited to jump back into this series. And a couple of other things I noticed were that Robert Jordan wrote some stuff in his story, his imagination and some of the fantastical things that happen in this story are things that in the 90s, right, when this came out, you hadn't really seen even in Hollywood. He had some big stuff in here that when I remember when I read it, I said, wow, I haven't seen that before in a movie. I haven't thought about that. Maybe something like that happening before that a sorceress or sorcerer could do that. So there's some really awesome stuff in this book, and now in 2014, it doesn't seem as awe-inspiring, but I promise you, back when I first read it, shortly after it had come out, it really was awesome. So.
You're right, John. Comparisons are inevitable. We live in the span of a decade with Hollywood in particular, being able to create these visions that previously you couldn't even get a good swinging Spider-Man through New York City. When I was growing up with comics, I was like, this would be great. So a generation now has seen these advances and these people's imaginations come to life on the screen. So you're going to make the comparisons. For me, it's about blocking it all out. It's about sitting here and just taking the story for what it is. There's it was influenced and inspired by other previous works, and obviously works after this who were translated in the movies. You think you've seen it, but taking all that away and just saying, this is this world, and see how the author fleshes it out. Again, the best part for me, not just like the whoa, like in your face opening, is like these characters are funny. I don't care about any other fantasy character. I care about these guys, and it's I love the interaction and the relationships, and we'll get into that. So let's actually start. Basically, we open up big, Johnny. What happens in the prologue? The prologue it's an interesting choice because it's no less than the ages-long battle between light and dark and control over all of creation. So pretty intense opening, especially the way it's set up. Very shocking and personal because there are two powerful opponents. The morning of light, or the light of morning. I'm dyslexic, I guess. The light of morning is the good guy, and then the betrayer of... What's his real name?
Luz Theron Telamon.
All right, Johnny, you are officially in charge of all the names in the book. So, when, not if, but when you mess them up, the audience...
Oh, they'll pounce on me. It's going to be bad. I have a funny feeling the fans of this series are going to be vicious. So I got my thick skin on.
Your job. Okay, so I'm calling the light of the morning, and he's with the betrayer of hope. That's their nicknames, and that's what I'm going to stick with. But they're basically in this place that's been ravaged, and the light of morning can't remember anything. But then the betrayer of hope comes. He mocks him. He looks at the ruin of all the people that are dead around him, and he says, "I've defeated you." And the guy is stuck in a daze looking for his wife, thinking there's a party or something about to happen, and trying to get everything in order. And the guy says, "I will not let it end like this. You will know that I defeated you." So he pretty much blasts him with his dark power, and the guy is in extraordinary pain, and then he remembers everything, and he basically killed everyone in that room, which is every person that's close to him ever. and things just, I mean, it just comes at you really quickly, and it's really brutal. And you find out that this Dark Lord, I mean, the Light of the Morning has his memory back. He says, I will seek you to the end of time and destroy you for killing Alina. His wife is among the dead. And the guy basically says,
I didn't do it. Not by my hand.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the Light of the Morning, he killed his own family, so he's actually in this personal little hell of his own making, and he looks at the guy, and he doesn't know that this will go on forever and ever. The guy reminds him that this battle will go on forever and ever. But
it's been going on too. And then the Destroyer of Hope also said, well, maybe it wasn't. Someone mentioned that Telamon had made a strike against the Dark Lord, and this was the counterstroke.
That's right.
And this is what caused him to kill everyone he loved.
And so you're kind of set up with this, and then the Light of the Morning disappears. He goes to a planet with a river, and at the river he basically absorbs what they call the Sidane, I think. But that's your job to tell me.
The Sidene, I think it is. And well, we probably want to wait before we start bringing those names up too much, because it'll come up later on with some of the other characters. And I had a couple of things I wanted to run by you there. But yeah, the Sidene, he touched the one power from the true source.
Exactly. The one power from the true source is kind of the crux of the whole story. That's the light side, and how all the powers through our characters are channeled. And he basically absorbs all of it, and then it destroys him. It creates a mountain, and in essence, I think right here it says it breaks the world.
Yeah.
And it breaking
Great
the world.
Great concept. Breaks the world. That just those words right there have a lot of weight. Breaking of the world. That was a really cool concept.
It is. I think he can trademark that, because it's not like destroying a world, but it's causing, basically the end of civilization with earthquakes and storms and just a raging of chaos, a planet destabilized. But it creates a new world, and people remember the legend how the dragon did that. So some people think the dragon is bad. And that's his nickname. I'm sorry. The Light of the Morning, his other nickname is the dragon. And so in legend, some people say he broke the world. He is evil. And some people say they know that Sidane, or that the good light was tainted. He was tricked by the Dark Lord, and yeah, he destroyed the world. But he needs to come back, because he's the only one who can destroy the Dark Lord. So you know what? Great prologue, and that's it right there. And he disappears. He's destroyed because he sucks in all the one power, breaks the world, the mountains come up, and ages pass. And then we come to the present. But the beginning sets it up, and you're like, wow, that's a really deep opening. But then it comes to what is kind of like this picturesque little corner of the world, and it's at the tail end of winter. Winter will not go away. Our main characters are actually the protagonist. Rand Althor, I can actually say that one. Rand Althor is walking down the road with his father, and we kind of find out that the winter will not cease. Wolves are very they're very daring, and they're coming out. They're actually attacking people as well as livestock. So you get this kind of this really tentative feeling that things are not all well, and people, they need something, and when they're walking down the road, what they need is, they need spring to come, basically. But we'll get to the town in a second. When they walk down the road, you're kind of like, okay, this is a nice little quiet corner of the world, until Rand looks back, and there's the Dark Rider, and the malice and the hate of this Dark Rider, whose cloak is not being whipped by the wind, and everything about him is wrong. This thing scares him to death, and then he trips, and the guy's gone. Tells his dad, and that's important. Everybody eventually, we find out, is actually seeing this Dark Rider, at least all the boys of a certain age, and that kind of builds up. So I just kind of gave it away, but it's kind of like, who is this guy, and is Rand being targeted? But
hey Josh, did the book say exactly what age he was? I don't ever remember picking up a specific age. I kind of got the idea he was right around 20. Did you get that same feeling, or did you think he was more like 16 or 17?
Well, he's still not good with the ladies, so he has trouble talking to Edwin.
Yeah, but
so
I couldn't really tell. I kept thinking in my head he was closer to 20. At least that's what I wanted him to be. And if you got a boy living with his father way out on a farm, he probably would be awkward in the city. But I didn't know that. That just kind of mattered to me later on in the book as he did some stuff, right, that I don't want to divulge yet.
No, you're right. You're right. It's a maturity level. They're secluded on this farm or on this in the Two Rivers, and Edmonds Field is the name of the town where the people live, and they live on the edge of that. So it's kind of like believability. That's important. I mean, you're right. It's a matter of what age is the kid, and can he wield a sword? Can he protect his father? And can he do some of the high demanding stamina things that he does? But it's fun when they actually enter Edmonds Field because Tam, his father, is a widower, and I love the language that Jordan does here. Jordan says, everybody's trying to set him up. It says, I'll quote, "The good wife's eyes weighed and measured him as neatly as any merchant's scales and tapes." So it's hilarious how the women are measuring him up. But they get into town, and this is where we meet a ton of characters. Again, the book actually shines not only because of this big, grand, universe that's open to us at the beginning, the epic scale, and basically what's at stake, but when you get into this town and you meet the people that are probably going to be, we know, eventually thrown into this. You meet Matt, his friend, who's also seen the Dark Rider. You eventually meet Perrin, his other friend who's seen the Dark Rider, and the town council. There are a different assortment of characters, and they're supposedly in charge of the town council. But the next person that they meet, because no one ever comes here, is a pretty fascinating character. It's a stranger called Moraine. And Moraine, with the Dark Rider there, everybody's kind of worried. It's like, oh, there's a stranger in town, and they're freaking out because it's this warrior-looking guy with this woman, unlike anything anybody's ever seen. But when you meet her, it's really great because she gives you all these cryptic messages. I love the cryptic nature and how the world builds around things she says. There's one quote. It says, "Yet no one knows the great pattern that the wheel weaves, or even the pattern of an age. We can only watch and study and hope."
Brand new concepts by Robert Jordan too. The idea of, and I guess we could go ahead and talk about it. You've got the true source, right, and that is the light, right, and you've got the one power you can draw from the true source, which you'll find out later. Moraine can draw that one power because of who she is and what she does. But there's two parts to the power, and this is later explained in the book. But since we're already kind of here, we'll talk about it. There's two parts. There's a male part of the power, and there's a female part of the power. The male part is Sidene, and the female part is Sidar, I think it was, right? And
yeah, what you said.
Yeah, exactly. And so that one power, as I understand, is, and I may be saying this wrong, but the one power is what drives the wheel, right? Am I saying that correctly? That's what drives the wheel of time, and it weaves its own pattern, which I thought was brilliant. That's unlike anything I'd ever seen in another fantasy story or movie, okay? That the time would be looked at like a wheel that keeps turning, and it's weaving its own pattern, and the pattern is being weaved at its own will. You know what I mean? There's the humans are just being dragged along with it almost.
I looked at it as destiny.
On that power.
No, it's a beautiful way.
I kind of looked at it as destiny as well, but I guess you're right. They didn't really have a choice in a lot of it, because they would say sometimes the weave is being spun. That's it. They're involved now. So
that's right,
great concept.
Right. You're right, but the language and the way he sets it up, it's kind of like, you know what? There's only so much you can do in fantasy, but how do you make it your own? And Robert Jordan has made it his own with creating the language and kind of the what do you call it? The story or the world. He kind of owns it to a deeper level. Goes into all those languages, beautiful, flourishing languages. But I love the introduction of Moraine, and then Lan, her bodyguard. He has like a camouflage cloak, and he comes out of the shadows when she leaves, and you're like, whoa, who is that guy? And the relationships, again, one of my favorite relationships is between these two. We'll find out later more about that, but I just love the interplay between them and how they're central to the story. But we finally figure out why they're there. We figure out that Beltane, the big party that's about to happen, that's supposed to get everybody out of their houses.
Spring!
Spring is here. Not really, but we're not delaying the party. But the peddler comes to town and he's just a wagon-filled store. He's a merchant that brings his wares, and he tells everybody the world is at war, and that puts people on a tizzy, because this is where it's really cool. You see the mob, you hear the mob, and they talk about it's the dragon, because the dragon reborn. Again, some people think he's pure evil, and he's raised an army, and he has attacked a city called fill in the blank.
Oh, I can't remember. I just remember his name. It's Gildan. It's Gildan. The city,
Gildan.
But this is way south, right? Isn't that far into the south of this land that we're in here?
Know.
I think it is. The city of Gildan, and this dragon that the peddler's telling about, the dragon reborn, he might be a false dragon, right? So a false prophet. So again, another great layer Robert Jordan's added in, and his name's Logain. You'll hear Logain's name come up again, but yeah, he's raised an army. There's a big battle down at Gildan, and that's concerning to them. I want to talk about something that I think is a little cliche, but these guys are in the two rivers. They're in the city or the town of Emmons Field, and it's a quiet little village, and everyone's respectable and polite and things, right? I mean, we're a quiet little village. No one's going to bother us here. What a staple of fantasy stories, you know what I mean? It always starts off with some quiet little village, and they're always having some celebration with fireworks, celebration and fireworks. When I saw those two words, I was like, oh, roll eyes, okay. And I'm not knocking on Robert Jordan, but you can't seem to get away from that.
I'm not going to say it. Don't say it. Well,
no, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
We'll have a competition who brings it up first. For the uninitiated, then you have no idea what we're talking about, but that's okay.
Hey, did you also notice how the pacing of this book was a little different? And we are coming off Hyperion, where every detail mattered, every sentence mattered almost. In this one, I had a little time to let my imagination wander. You would come into something like Emmons Field, and where in other books we've read, you're getting a description as the action's driving forward. In this one, Robert Jordan will almost pause the action and describe everything around you. And it doesn't happen every time, but as you come to a new place, you will pause, and you will get a description of everything that you see laying before you, and then you'll move ahead into that area. And so it's paced a little bit differently, and it's not a bad thing. It's just different. And I had to make an adjustment because it wasn't as fast-paced as some other books that we've read, although we've crammed so much in just this first third. But
we did.
I liked it. It's a nice change of pace.
I was thankful for the straightforward narrative. Hyperion was everywhere. A lot of different players, and this is kind of as many players, but it's a straightforward narrative. They're introduced. You see the relationship building, so I'm thankful for that. And we actually had the peddler grabbed by the council, and he's dragged into the inn. And then they want to know what's going on, basically. They need to make a decision, again, to see if they're safe or not. But the wisdom comes along. She's the town healer, and the women in the town basically appoint her, and she can sense things, predict things. She has some sort of powers. And then here comes Rand's girlfriend. Fill in her name. John.
Egwene.
Edwin. Anyway, Egwene.
Egwene. It's Egwene. It's got to be.
It's got to be, but it's a weird.
Which sounded very close to Igraine.
It's
weird. And by the way, the Glee man that comes to town mentions an Arthurian legend story, doesn't he? That was a nice little Easter egg Robert Jordan threw in there.
I forgot about that. Yes, that pulling out the sword and the stone. I got to start taking notes. They're dropping those Easter eggs slowly, as to not say I can't keep up. So basically, the wisdom. Her name is Nina Eve. I like Nina Eve. Her name at least. She's very rough, and she's outspoken. And Egwene, we find out, might want to be a healer like her. Might want to be part of the wisdom, and that means taking her out of two rivers. And this was the only awkward point for me. It's just kind of like. Rand likes her, doesn't want to see her leave, but it's kind of like, what are his feelings for her? He's just totally awkward around her. But the wisdom stomps into the inn, kicks out the Gleeman. The Gleeman's another rare visitor. All these rare visitors showing up at one time. But he's actually very cool because he knows a bunch of tricks, a bunch of stories. He is the entertainment. And we find out, okay, the council makes a decision. And we have to scoot past the town. We know the town now. We know the characters and the players. But on the way home, Rand is relieved because his father and all the other councilmen who have sons, Matt and Perrin, they say, what we all know, you saw this Dark Rider, we're going to start patrols. So it's like, whew, big weight off his shoulders because they know it's not a figment of their imagination. And they get back to the Westwood that night, and you're like, all right, we're going to party tomorrow, bell time. We'll see more of the town, see more of the world building. But you know what? Robert Jordan defeats that expectation quickly because Tam gets his sword down, he locks the doors, and they're about to have dinner when someone knocks on the door. You're like, uh-oh, who's this? And then you don't even have to wait. The thing gets busted down, and this huge monster, this I don't know how to describe it, horns and
horns and a beast snout, but they also said some of them had beaks, right? So these things are pretty crazy looking.
Yeah, it's kind of like a whole zoo of crazy horde monsters, and I love how they're defined. They're not, they're not these other type of wandering hordes in this other fantasy series. The Trollocs have good sight in the dark, good smells, and good hearing, but they're lazy, and I love that because you wonder how these two guys alone in the Westwood. They're one of the few farms in the Westwood. That nearest to the mountain. No one ever really goes out there because of ancient lore and ancient fears of the mountain. But he's blinded by the light, which gives him the opening. And this was a heartfelt moment for me because Tam tells his son to run. As I just mentioned, Jordan defeats my expectations of the party of the next day, and I'm a little worried that Tam will actually sacrifice himself, which a father would do. His son is scared, and his son. Is he necessarily going to do what his dad says, or is he going to get caught up and try to save his dad, and things are just going to end badly because they can't defeat this thing? Because this thing actually, blinded as quickly as it is, Tam cuts it down, but right behind it
cuts down two of them. Cuts down two of them, right? As they come in, and he's blocked up the doorway. This was a really tough scene because you've got Rand who obeys his father immediately and runs. And you're thinking to yourself, well, no, you need to stay and help your father. He's all alone, but his father told him to run, and he's still a boy, right? And so he does that. He runs, and he actually goes through a window to get out of the house because he sees Trollocs coming in the back. And then this is the moment I said, "Oh, Rand!" And now he redeems himself, okay? But he sees him coming in the back, and he peeks his head up over the window, and he says, "Dad, they're coming in the back," and then, he's gone off to the woods, And I just said, "Oh, come on, guy." That's the best you could do. He's like, and then he runs.
Yeah,
it was a tough moment. Now he redeems himself, but that was kind of rough.
Well, because you think the dad's not going to make it.
Right.
The Trollocs are in the back door, and they came through the front. So you think he's a goner, but his dad is a pretty tough dude. He does his own leap out the window. And he says, "Run, Rand," and he runs the other way. So it's like, holy cow, Dad is hardcore. And Rand, the one part of the book that fell down for me here, the only part, I just, with these things that could see in the night and hear very well, it was just, I'm trying to figure out what senses. They have two keen senses. How could they actually meet up? Because his dad just appears and grabs Rand in the night, and he's injured, but they do find each other. I found that kind of a stretch. But he loses the Trollocs trail, and Rand redeems himself by basically laying his father down, ignoring him, saying, "I'm going to go back. We need to get help for you." And he goes back to the farmhouse. So this is pretty pulse pounding. Yeah. It's like this kid is brave.
Finally manned up.
He manned up in a huge way. I mean, this basically says, yes, we're going to like this character. At this point, you're kind of okay,
all right, guy.
He goes in the house, and a Trolloc was actually playing. He was pretending to be among his dead comrades, and he gets up and he says, "The Madril wants to speak to you." We find out.
Actually, Josh. Actually, he said,
But Rand can understand the grunts, and Rand doesn't do anything super heroic, but he does pull out Tam's Heron sword. There's a cool little inscription on it, and he took it from his dad, and he impales the Trolloc, and he gets him off of him. So he barely clears that. He gets what he needs, and when he goes through the woods, explain this to me, John, but he makes a litter, and he's pulling his dad through the woods. His dad is in a fever dream, and we found out a pretty big revelation. Tam is not really his dad. he found him on a battlefield, an abandoned baby, and it's in a fever dream, and Rand is still shocked and he's in disbelief. So this is kind of like a thing that's going to resonate and not get resolved anytime soon. But explain to me how he avoided the Dark Rider, because he stops in the woods and the Dark Rider and the Trollocs go by him, and I didn't understand if the thing stared directly at him. If he has, these things are really good at seeing, even the Madril. How could he get away? Do you remember that part?
Well, no. I mean, not besides what you just said. They just paused. I mean, he just stopped completely, and he tried to be as quiet as he could. They quit moving, and this of course was the Black Rider stalking you in the woods moment. I mean, it was kind of unavoidable. You were going to get to this, right? But
sure.
Yeah, they. Well, is it? I mean, how many times has that been used? It seemed very familiar, obviously, because we've read this in Tolkien before. But
you said it first.
he went up and down. Yeah, I don't know what I owe you for that, but whatever. So they go up and down the road, and they don't see Rand. I was a little surprised because we were just told what great senses these Trollocs had, and he wasn't that far off the road. He almost stumbled onto the road, and he had to kind of go back in the woods. They kind of lucked out on that one, which is fine.
Yes.
Which is fine. I mean, it's a perfect good.
Believe it or not, luck comes into the story a lot. Basically, it's again going back to the destiny thing. It's like the patterns in the wheel of time. You have to hope. You have to study and hope, and you have to understand not everything's in your hands. So we'll chalk it up to that larger, grand scheme of things. But then we get to the village where we think that hope will be found, and Tam will get help. And this is another character developing moment for me. That half the village is in ruins, burning, and Rand is just totally deflated. He's like, oh no, I mean, he's worn out. He finds Nina Eve, the town healer, and Nina Eve basically goes to the father and says, I can do nothing for him. And Rand is beside himself, and he can't. I think he asks her, he won't believe it, and she says, he's gone. I have to spend my time where I can help. So she's very matter of fact. This is the character of Nina Eve. She's candid, and so you are kind of like, you don't know if Tam's going to make it. So really, the expectations of whether the father will live or die is still it's up in the air. But we go and find out how the Trollocs, how the town did survive. There's not a massacre there. It's just a burning village. Everyone's alive. It's kind of a relief there. But we find out that it's Moraine and it's Lan, who is a warrior from the Great Blight, who fights Trollocs. That's my little tagline to describe Lan. And she is the Aes Sedai. She's a witch. I call them witches. I hope that's not too far of a stretch. She can channel the true source. Only women can channel the true source, or the
female side of the one power. She can touch because it's untainted.
It's untainted. So the mythology and everything is coming together, John. This is like the big, action is just speeding up. And
hey Josh, you mind if I interject a point right here?
Yeah.
There was something that when we got to this part of the book, something occurred to me, and this is going to sound a little cliche, but just bear with me because you'll see my point, and that is a lot of these fantasy stories try to include females as heroes as well, and it feels forced in a lot of them, right? In this story, I would say Robert Jordan actually achieved. I don't want to use the word equality because this is not some kind of political podcast, but women had a real role in this world. It wasn't just, oh yeah, women can be warriors too. The women were actually the wisdom. The women, the Aes Sedai, were the ones who were kind of manipulating how the men were going. Any of the men that could channel the one power. This was a real role that had real importance, and it wasn't just, oh yeah, the women can do it too. And I don't know if that point's coming across clearly enough, but he actually established them as a real player in society. And there was, in this story, you didn't get that, oh, you're a girl, you can't do what us boys can do. That really hasn't come up in this story. And it was kind of refreshing, and it was neat to see how Robert Jordan established a truly important role, or just he did away with that whole concept that we still deal with today. And it was really, when I realized that, I said, oh wow, this is great.
I would say that they're the driving force of the story. I'm glad you brought it up. They're the driving force. Moraine is actually the one who has the weight, the kind of they're coming maybe to a point in this age where things have to, the great battle, or the dragon, real dragon, will he be reborn? Because we kind of get this concept now, and they have this responsibility, this stewardship, and she's the driving force. She owns this. She knows this land is like this symbiotic partner of hers that has to help her fulfill this mission. And then, of course, you have Nina, Eve, and Edwin, which we'll see later. So they are the driving force. And this is where a big decision comes in. We'll segue right into the fact that Tam is on his deathbed, and the Aes Sedai are not trusted. Again, two worldviews of who these people are, what their agenda is, and it's a mixed agenda. But the big thing is they're here to stop the Dark One, and she's not faltering from that. She's not going to make apologies, no matter what people think about her. And so Rand is scared to go to her, but the Gleeman and Brand Alvear, the inn owner and the mayor, put the idea in his head that maybe she can save your dad. And that's a scary thought to him, but he is willing to pay that price. And the relationship, again, there is kind of formed between them, and that connection. I loved it. But you see Lan burning Trolloc bodies, you see Moiraine recovering, and it's like, okay, I need your help. So it's really fun. And then she does. She heals the father, and it's kind of like that we're out of the woods here. But then the big part of the story actually comes. You kind of get this whole setup, but the villagers are not happy and actually blame her for the Trollocs coming, even after she healed many of them, and there's a mob out to get her. So Rand, after dreaming a very dark dream, he dreams about the mountain, and we get some imagery there, and we'll see that keep coming at us. But he comes down, and everyone is waiting because this mob is surrounding who we now call Moiraine Sedai. And she starts twirling her staff, John, and this is part of the book that really got me because it set up my commitment to this story. Because who are the Two Rivers people? They're none other than the descendants of the Manetheren. And the Manetheren was the kingdom on the island under the mountain. And their king, King Aemon, the biggest compliment you could give anyone was you have the courage or the heart of Aemon. He was the bravest warrior who fought the longest and the hardest against the Dark One during the Trolloc Wars. And you're getting all this from Moiraine, and I'm eating it up. Everyone in the story is eating it up, and I'm like, holy cow!
Now so he was the sword that couldn't be broken, right? Was that
couldn't be shattered? The sword that could not be shattered. You're right.
Could not be shattered. Okay, when you're done with this description, I got to tell you something that irritated me about this. So go ahead.
No, nothing.
Yes, I will tell you something, and you'll see my point.
Here's the history. The Manetheren, the Red Eagle was their banner, and they fought the Trollocs. Everywhere the Dark Lord was, they were there. But on a field of battle far away, the Dark Lord, basically, while they were gone, the army of Manetheren, he was going to attack the homeland and wipe them from the face of the world. And you didn't think that there was any chance or hope. But the Manetheren, faster than they could have ever gone, they over a forced march, over 3 days, I think, made it back. And they were there at the Manetheren Drell. I love the name of the river. I mean, I'm memorizing all these names because these are the cool names that I can remember. But the Manetheren Drell was the southern river. I'm sorry. They took their stance at the northern river. Remember, the kingdom is bordered on either side of the river. Thank goodness Trollocs cannot swim. But the Terrandrell, they held it, and the king was promised help in 3 days. And in this horde of tens of thousands with ravens filling the sky, they weren't supposed to survive the first hour. So this whole thing is epic, John. Super epic. They hold the river for 3 days. Help does not come. They hold it for 6 and then 10. And then Aemon knows he is betrayed, and he feels the bitter taste of betrayal. But he decides he can't hold the river. He comes back on his side to the kingdom, destroys the river, and says everyone to flee. When they flee, the Trollocs come across, and the warriors give their lives to help the civilians flee, and many of the civilians, including women, join them. So they pay for that land with their blood and their lives in half a generation. And Aemon dies at Two Rivers. That is their last stand, where their home is now. These farmers who have no idea that this is their ancestry, and you're just sitting there again. For me, slack-jawed, pretty much goosebumps everywhere. And everyone died there. And when Aemon died, his wife, the queen, she basically channels the true source, and she makes all the remaining Trollocs, most of them burst into flames, and so their victory turns to defeat. She dies, though, from channeling that true source. The Trolloc army is scattered. Other armies finish them off. And so that is the end of Manetheren. It never rises again, and their descendants stay on the land, but forget this. And she's mad at them for not remembering this, or for being cowardly and not understanding, that they are a great race of people.
Right, and that's exactly what should have happened in the first place. Is she could have saved all those warriors they lost if she had just sacrificed herself in the first place and killed all of the Trolloc generals, and then the whole army would not have died.
She would have died. She would have died.
Got it, but all those other people wouldn't have. You're the leader. You're the leader. You're the queen. And sometimes, okay, so I'm being a jerk about it. However, when I finally read that at the end, I was like, really? You waited till they all died before you did that? Really? And then I said, all right, let's move on. So, all right, Robert Jordan fans, I know you're hating me right now, but don't, because you know I make sense.
And I've got to say that did not even, maybe that crossed my mind, but come on, it's the king and queen.
I know. She
probably
didn't get to that point until she had grieved so much where she could finally draw that much energy from the one power. So I mean, I can explain myself away, right, and defeat my own argument, but still I have to make the point.
Good.
You waited till they all died, really?
Your point is made, sir.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah. That I would have to say, though, that if they were leaderless, if Aemon lost his wife, he wouldn't be the courageous guy anymore, and he'd be deflated. The kingdom would kind of just become mediocre.
Just trying to bring the funny here, Josh. Just trying to bring the funny.
It's epic. Man. It's epic.
You're right. It is.
So my epic tale that
they have strong blood flowing through their veins.
And guess what? The story works. All these sheepish farmers, especially the troublemakers, they're like, "We're sorry," and they walk off. So. But it sets the context for why we care, why maybe the Dark Rider is here, because we find out these boys of a certain age are who he's after, and this is where the party, the fellowship, is formed. So but this is kind of a dysfunctional fellowship. We have Lan and Moraine, who no one trusts. So it sets up like we have to leave so the Trollocs won't come back. So it's the three boys: Perrin, Mat, Rand. And then here comes the Gleeman jumping down from the rafters. And you know what? It's really funny because we kind of get our first taste of how Moraine, she will protect the mission at all cost and keep these boys from the Dark One at all costs. And we'll find out later what that cost is. So she's kind of threatening toward the Gleeman if he doesn't if he doesn't just say, yeah, I'll come along or whatnot. It doesn't go. It kind of just pans out where he comes along. We don't need to get bogged down there. But then Egwene, his girlfriend, comes, and then no, that's it. So you have Egwene who comes along because she found out the boys were trying to hide stuff, and she's such the gumshoe. And so now we have our party, and they have to sneak out at night. And this is the Tam. It's not a big farewell. It's like we have to leave. It is of the essence because again, here comes in the luck factor. They have possibly a whole Trolloc army after them. But when they sneak out into the night, this is where the adventure really starts, John. I'm chomping at the bit now. I know how important the former Manetheren is, and what these people are potentially going to be. You don't know for sure if one of them or all of them are the Dragon Reborn. We don't know how the mythology is going to play out. But they're on the road, and this scary Drakkar comes, a flying monster. And so the Dark One has all these things, so it's kind of unfair, right? He has all these scouts, all these monsters. You're like, holy cow, they're not going to get a break. They're trying to sneak out during the cover of night. But I love this part just because of the realness. It felt real to me. They were going to Watch Hill, and when they made it to Watch Hill, the Drakkar actually swoops down on them, and the horses go crazy, and you get this sense of action or the battle fever from Rand. All these beginning, it's nicely sprinkled in how the Tam's sword just appears in his hand. He doesn't even realize it, and it's fun to see that. But then we know that the Drakkar has reported them, so they might be out of luck. But then
that thing's just like a drone. it's the Murdrall's drone.
It is, and the thing is pretty. not too smart, and that Moraine actually tricks it. She does a big mist, the mist that goes everywhere. And again, Rand
That takes out a great amount of energy from her. Every time she does something like that, it drains her, like some of these bigger feats, and she actually has to go and rest afterwards. Like she wasn't capable of just continuing to do all of these things to help them get away, which was another great plot device in the story, right? Because you would just think, well, come on, Moraine, just do all this stuff and you guys get away. You can't. She can't do that. It's very, it consumes her almost.
No, really good point. She's not all powerful. We are understanding the Aes Sedai. We are getting through Rand's perspective and kind of the torn feelings he has about her, and should he kind of have her as a protector, and he's kind of creeped out by all these feats, but it does drain her. So you're right, great plot mechanism. They make it in the mist after hours of riding. It seems like a fog pun. There's a pun for you, but it's all a fog of memory. Hours of riding. Literally, these guys are physically exhausted. And I love how Lamb jumps into Terran Ferry, which is this alien world to these guys. This is as far as the Two River folks have ever come. So they're just kind of like, oh my goodness, our adventure is actually real, but we don't like this. So it's kind of funny.
Here we are in this city full of grumpy people.
Grumpy people. We see their maturity level, kind of scared, not really feeling adventurous. Lan is banging on the ferryman's door in the middle of the night, and it's like, we're in the fog, don't do that, we're in a strange place. But it's cool though, because Lan, he's taking charge. He says, ferry us across, and he grabs the guy's arm and starts putting gold, the universal language. He puts gold in his hands, and they get across. It's a little bit touch and go about, they just comment on how they might be attacked. These men might attack them. So I love all the people building. It's like, who can you trust? Who can't you trust? And the whole motif of trust. Oh my goodness, they keep bringing it up. And I don't mean to complain. It's just like they literally, no one trusts anyone. So this is far from a unified mission. This is just escape from the Trollocs and let's survive. And are we getting in worse danger than we already were? So it's really fun, actually. This is why I like the story, John. It's like you are so unsure of what's going to happen, and after the ferry crossing, it gets even worse because in the mist you see the ferry go down in a whirlpool, which is
because Moraine destroyed it.
Moraine destroyed it, and she won't admit it, but she won't deny it.
Yeah.
So
she's like, we can't trust you, so I'm gonna sink your ferry.
That was pretty much it. But they basically gave them more gold.
More gold.
So you're good. So they're good guys. I mean, come on, if they're bad guys, that's the biggest ending since Sixth Sense. I won't spoil that, but it's cool because we find out because they're in a shelter. They're camping out, and not Moraine. Yeah, Moraine and Egwene start conferring, and Egwene's basically becoming an Aes Sedai. Moraine is encouraging her. Rand is looking back from a distance in horror, like, my girlfriend. And it's like, well, you're not doing much to keep her, buddy. But
well, you know what though? I have to disagree with you there. I think Robert Jordan, and I'm not even sure. I can't remember this detail from when I read the book a long time ago, which is great because I'm not even spoiling it for myself. But I can't remember if those two actually are together later on. I'm not sure that they are. However, Robert Jordan is doing a much better job than what we've read in previous books where a boy and a girl, and I'm not going to mention which one, boy and a girl are supposed to have this love interest. He's actually developing it well. It's believable.
Correct.
Rand is a little awkward. Egwene is stubborn, and she's either going to be a wisdom or she's going to be an Aes Sedai, and she's, for all intents and purposes, at this point, going to be more important than Rand. And,
you're right.
But the love interest is developing really well, and also something else that I noticed about the scenes when they would stop and take shelter is it's the old cliche of, let me show you how to use that sword, boy. So everyone's getting a fighting lesson from Lan right now, and they're all gonna be awesome in combat suddenly when it happens. And I'm being sarcastic there because they were not all awesome in combat right away, but that is kind of, you can't get away from that either, right? But I just wondered, why is it that farm boys never know how to use a weapon? Because today farm boys know how to use like a firearm, right? You'd be hard pressed to find a farm boy that doesn't know how to use a weapon. Okay, so
Good
just they
point.
always
That is an
seem
awesome
all
point.
the fantasy stories they seem ignorant if they're farm boys. So
Oh man, that's a really good point. They have to actually that's a discrepancy in the genre they got to fix right now. Every farm boy
it's
today,
not bad, but
they
I had
got
to
the same
laugh at it.
sword. No, he knew how to use a bow and arrow though. So
Yes, they
actually,
did know how to use the bow. Yeah.
so no, we had to say they're covered there. They eventually, after a week of traveling, they make it to Barlon. And there's not a lot, they flesh out the relationships. And actually, the one thing I hinted at early, Moraine said she would not let the Dark One win at all cost. And so, there's some character building during the journey to Barlon, which is the first big city. And the boys are like, wow. But before we get there, Moraine actually at the campfire one night, she hears the boys talking, and they're talking about, you know what? Now that we're away from the Trollocs and out of danger, let's go see the world. They're kind of getting excited. Let's go visit this place. I don't know if they say let's get away from Moraine, but she comes up and she basically says, "Oh, so you forget so soon the danger you're in." And she at the end of her little speech, she says, "You know what? Before the Dark Lord gets you, I will destroy you myself." And I'm like, awkward, because that is a big moment. It shows you that no matter that she's protecting them, there are larger costs. There are larger things in this world that they're unaware of, and the costs are great. And so it's kind of scary, and you kind of get the hint that the Dragon Reborn and other people the men who have tried to wield the one power. They're somehow intermixed in that. Don't know. Not going to speculate. But it's just still the building of, okay, what is going on and how are they going to develop their roles? Because right now Moraine and Lan are leading this party. So
Well, hey,
that
Josh,
was scary.
this is actually a good. Well, yeah. First of all, and then the boys kind of, it was just silence. It was that, well, gee golly, Moiraine, and they kind of kicked their can down the road a little bit, and they're like, all right. But at this point, I started to question something that I should have paid attention to earlier in the book, and that is going back to the true source and the one power. And so we said at the beginning, the females can draw from the female side because it's untainted. The males can draw from the male side. There's few males that can do it, but it's tainted as though it has oil on top of water. So it's not actually completely dispersed, but there is that darkness there. And I could not remember the Dark One. He's not drawing from the true source, is he? He has a different source of power. I don't think it's really been discussed.
They haven't explained that. You're right.
Okay, all right, okay.
And the men who actually can wield the power actually go loco.
Yes,
they literally
because
go crazy.
yeah,
So
it makes them go mad. Yeah, and that's why the females have to be there to control them and direct them until so they don't get out of hand.
And we don't know what the end game there is. That's why it's so scary, and the stakes are real. That Rand and his friends might be going down that path. So again, everything is constructed very well, and you kind of feel there's something at stake, and you get worried because like you said, the relationships with the girl and the boy are there, and everything is building up, and you're like, holy cow, I just don't know what's going to happen, and that's what keeps driving me. But they get to Barlon, and they get through the gate, and they find out White Cloaks, who's another faction, and they hate the Aes Sedai,
the Children of the Light.
Yeah, the White Cloaks are the Children of the Light, and trying to make everybody do what they want to. So the governor of the city will only let a few of their number in at a time. The rest are camping outside the city. But you don't kind of understand, okay, they are trying to follow the light. They think they have the true story or history, and they are also protectors against the Dark One, but they go in a totally different fashion about it, or they're like kind of, these fascist folks who
no, they were extremist zealots.
Yeah.
And that whole concept of the Children of the Light being the way they are, obviously to me felt very familiar. They're very dangerous people because they are extremists, and if you don't walk the path they walk, you're dead. And that's going on all over the world right now. I mean, what a real thing to bring into your story.
You're right. It's kind of like, this is not just characters that might be in danger. These are people, real stakes. If you get in the wrong hands, you're done for. And these guys are a very near and present danger. But they get into the city. The kids are wide-eyed. The Glee Man actually gets an audience he wants at the inn. It's very fun to meet the inn owner, and I feel the world even more. It's kind of like, fine, we established the world, but can we kind of care about these different places? Are they all going to run together? For Barrelon, it's very distinctive for me. They get settled in the inn. We have some super bad dreams that night, really bad dreams. Bal Alzan, which is the Dark One, visits all the boys in their dreams, and he basically mocks them and taunts them and says, "Come to me," and he basically flips them out. These guys are kind of traumatized after this dream, because you get a sense that no one is there for them. He's like, "Come to me, because the Aes Sedai will use you and then throw you away and kill you if you don't do what they say." So here we go. Next morning.
Right, but didn't that make you stop and think for a minute? Because and Robert Jordan added another layer of complexity into the story just with that. Because you don't act. I mean, Moraine's done some stuff that seems to suit her own purposes, right? She's fighting the Dark One, but from the sound of it, the Aes Sedai are not bound to one particular path. They might all be in Tar Valon or Tar Valon, whatever you're supposed to say.
Valon.
That's where they're trained. But some of them, there were rumors that Aes Sedai were siding with Logain down in the south at the Battle of Gildan. So they don't have, it's not like they all are required to have one particular loyalty. They can go throughout and kind of make their own path, and they may have ulterior motives. And the Dark One says to Will Rand in his dream is that they're going to use you and they will consume you until there's nothing left. Almost like they're going to use you for their own purposes until they make you go mad, which is why eventually there's going to be another, you can draw conclusions, right? Oh, there's going to be another breaking of the world, but it makes them sound very nefarious. Well, maybe not nefarious, but just not true blue. And so it's a whole nother layer of complexity. Now we don't know if he can trust Moiraine or not. Is she really out for his best interest, or is it her best interest, or is she really fighting the Dark One? And all these questions come up, and that made it such a better story at that point.
It gets a little depressing for the boys then, right? I mean, it's kind of,
yeah.
No trust. There's no trust there. One of my favorite scenes, and we don't need to sit here and speculate beyond exactly why I'm saying it's my favorite scene, but it's when they actually get to get clean and they have the communal bath. It's just a fun scene because Matt can't keep his mouth shut, and
I hate Matt.
And he's about to give away that they came into Trollocs, and it's just such a funny scene because everybody's saying, okay, we have to be careful what we say. And then Lan comes in and he scalds them. But actually, I don't have a good reason why I brought it up, so forget I brought it up.
Because we had to mention that Matt is a fool. That's why I know he probably plays a very important role later on, but right now he is a fool.
He's the mouth of the town. And here's the thing: they actually get out into the town the next day. It's kind of after the dream. That puts a damper on everything. But you know what? Rand comes across the peddler all the way back from the Two Rivers. Plot hole, maybe, maybe not. How could he get there that fast? These guys, the party was traveling on swift horses with Moraine's magic, but he finds the peddler there who they thought was killed by the Trollocs. He's not. And you get a little bit more kind of like, mystery as to, how he got there, how he survived. Is he a little Gollum who became a traitor and sold them out to the Trollocs? That was my conspiracy theory. But he's quickly in, he's quickly out. They meet the White Cloaks. And then Matt the Fool actually pulls a trick on them and splatters them with mud with the barrels. And this is where Rand again gets his little, battle lust or kind of Dragon Reborn channeling here, and he throws his hand next to a sword, and the White Cloaks see the heron symbol, which is the Swordmaster symbol. And so they have a little, type A, mano a mano standoff, and that actually quickly dissipates. And they get back to the end. We have to get to the big part, the big battle, but we kind of see how the Modril actually tracks them down. Finally tracks them down. There's a great night of fun. I loved it when the Glee Man was performing. You get more history. You get Rand dancing with all the ladies. It's a fun night. And then at the very end of the night, Lan says, "Be careful. There's something wrong." Foreshadowing. And then the Modril actually comes out of the shadows down at the end of the hall. So is it believable? Sure. He's a tracker. They can't necessarily, they did their tracking. They finally narrowed him down after a day. after catching up with them after the Drakkar regained their trail.
Well, that peddler Thane was probably a dark one, or a dark. What is it?
A dark friend. Yeah.
A dark friend. He's probably dark friend. We also forgot to mention that somehow Nynaeve, I called her Nynaeve, she shows up. She shows up in Baerlon, and you're going, well, how did she catch up with him so fast?
Yep. There's another one. Sorry.
Now she's joined the party.
And she and Moiraine have a standoff. We won't go into that, but they're at odds. She's a healer or wisdom, not as powerful, but she has her own special abilities. And then Moiraine, basically says no, they can't leave. So you're kind of like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And there's another female protagonist. I forget her name. She's a tomboy.
She's a soothsayer.
A soothsayer. Yep, that's her title. And she sees things. She freaks Rand out, and I forgot that part. But it's just a quick scene where she says, I see things, I see sparks flying around you guys. And now, usually the sparks come when you're a big group. Now, just between Moiraine and Nynaeve, I saw sparks around them. She's part of the equation. And Rand was beside himself that Egwene had to come along, and she was in danger. And now he's like, Nynaeve's not going to come along. She's stubborn. But what actually changes all that, the Madril almost comes, and I don't know if he's going to finish Rand. He pulls out his sword, and again, like they said, this thing strikes terror in the hearts of everyone, and he's frozen. But Lan comes, and the Madril, disappears right before he comes, and he tells him, he's like, we have to leave now. So the action gets propelled forward because this Madril almost has him. We don't know. Could he have spirited him away? Was he going to kill him? No, because we know the Dark One wants him, and they leave. And at the gates, they encounter none other than the Zealots. The White Cloaks are going to, spoil everything, and we might have everything fall apart here if the Madril catches up. I love how Moiraine becomes this 50-foot tall giant and scares the heck out of them. Everyone rushes out the gate, and she's this huge giant, which I found a little unbelievable, did not draw attention, because the Madril and the Trollocs first go, and they burn the inn. Some of our favorite people at the end that we, kind of care about, they actually, everything burns down to the ground, and there's a moral quandary, this is where Robert Jordan throws in, we need to go back and help them, and Moiraine's like, no, we will die. We'll send them money later. So, Robert Jordan throws in a lot of action, a lot of great kind of, it's clicking for me right now. They were just ahead.
He throws in that collateral damage.
Collateral damage, yeah.
And you know what? That's, if you're going to defeat the Dark One, that's part of it, and we're not going to stop to go and assess damage and feel for everyone. And that, you're right, it's kind of a tough scene.
Yeah, there's a moral quandary, but it also shows you that they're one step ahead, that they are getting lucky, and they don't need to sit here and be indecisive because I'll go and throw in the Tolkien reference. It's like the journey hinges on the edge of or the tip of a sword, or I can't remember the terminology, but it's just one decision or another could hang the fate of millions in the balance. So they're one step ahead. So I love that kind of sense of urgency, and so this is kind of the big climax for this part of the book. We'll flesh this out, and we'll finish up with them trying to get to the Arenal. I'm remembering all the names of these rivers, so I'm a little proud of myself. I must have a thing for water. But the Arenal is the water on the Camelin Road that they have to get to. Again, they can basically make their stand or get across because water is a weakness, and they walk. They don't run because they're horses. Realistically, they're going on a forced march. They just have to stay ahead, and they hear the Trollocs coming with horns. But Lan scouts it out, and they're not more than 10 hours behind them, then 7 hours, and they hear horns across all directions of the hills, and they realize it's a trap, and they break off the road, and they're going through the woods, and this is the fun part. It's like, so these guys are smart. The evil guys have actually caught up. We thought they could have outrun them, they got their head start, but now it's like, here's the strategy. Here's the big battles, and they don't get away because they are surrounded on all sides, and they split toward the north, I believe, and they're going north up the hills, and on the ridge, on the other ridge across the other hill is a Myrdrill and a whole line of Trollocs as far as you can see.
Yeah, it's about three to five fists, right?
The fist.
One fist being about 100, so you're looking at one fist equaling about a U.S. Army company size.
There you go. So basically, this, we know that the Trollocs, you can't defeat them head on, especially with their odds, and they don't have this light. The light blinds them, and then you have a Modril, this thing that terrorizes you and freezes you in place. So you're like, holy cow! What's the only advantage they have, John? As in any good story, they have the high ground, and I love this part because it's so quick
They
and
have
so
violence of action.
there you go. I loved how Lan said, "Stay close, follow me." And then he gave a war cry, and then it was on. And they went down the hill, and all the others, immediately, they take up the cry of Manetheren. They're like, "For Manetheren!" And Matt cries the battle cry, which is like in Latin, but it means, for the banner of the eagle or the red eagle, I can't remember.
Oh, like, I thought he said, "I'm not a fool!" But I must have misread that. Okay.
And they charge. And I love the scene. Lan goes toe-to-toe with Modril, and lightning flashes, sword clashes that ring bells across the valley. You're like, holy cow. And how
that was awesome. He was fearless against that whatever the Murdral are supposed to be, the spook, right? The half-man. Demon, part man, yeah.
Shadow Man. And it's like, holy cow. But even Lan mentioned that even the bravest seasoned warrior, they become terrorized and lose all sense of training when they come across these things. So Lan must be a special kind of warrior. I mean, really, he's tempered with steel, and we find that out. He was born with a sword in his hand.
The last lord of the Seven Towers, Josh. I don't know what that means, but it sounds awesome.
So, hey, what else can you say, right?
Yeah.
And Moiraine holds her own. Moiraine holds them off, and she keeps the women
they were
safe,
running from her. They were running from her, and she started going after them at one point. They're like, oh, hey, she's burning us.
Good point. That's a good point. So I love the whole scene, but the Two Rivers boys are getting manhandled or Trolloc handled, and it's kind of.
I was proud of them. I was proud of proud, right? I'll put that in air quotes. Rand and Perrin were hacking away. I mean, you couldn't have done any better, right? They had very little training, and they just went in there hacking and slashing.
It was realistic.
It was good.
It was very realistic. You're kind of like, okay, odds are against them. Make it believable, please. This is kind of like you've been fleeing these monsters, and so the believable part came when the Trollocs all at one time, when they had gotten the advantage, they were ripping the boys off the horses, and it's kind of like if you let go of the horses run away, and you're literally done for. So right at the edge of defeat, you see how Lan slices the Modril's head off. Graphic spoiler. No, and because the Modril is like the headless horseman now, literally, the Trollocs are on the ground, wreathing in pain, and they all break for it, and they break up the hill to the next ridge, and you're like, okay, we got away. But then 3 Modril and the Southern Fist, who are coming up behind them, you have 3 Fist, 3 Modril, and then Moiraine she's like, okay, got to get the magic on. So this is a great part, and she builds a wall of flame, and this thing basically goes 20 feet high across the valley, and it does wear her out. That's her last trick right now, and she almost falls over, and Lan has to he prop her up, and he's like, run now. So that was a great battle, quick, swift, but unbelievable in the whole kind of pace of it and the step by step about how they almost got caught. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, that scene in the book is one of the few things that I remember from originally reading it in high school. I remember that, and I for some reason thought that she shot that flame across the valley and it actually consumed a bunch of the Trollocs, but that wasn't the case. It was just a barrier. But now she did ripple the earth under their feet and knock them all over. And I also thought it was interesting that the death of the Murdral threw the Trollocs into complete confusion. So I imagine that's going to be something important to remember later on.
Yeah,
when other big battles come up, you know who to attack first, because they can't do anything without that leadership. Like, it's got direct mind control over them.
As Conan the Barbarian would say, it's cut off the head of the snake, which he does pretty well. No, the rippling of the earth, I know we are at the end of the podcast, but that is not something to glaze over, how the earth rippled and violently shook. So it wasn't just a wall of fire. I mean, Moiraine really laid it down, and that's what took the Trollocs down. And I forgot the chronology. It's such an awesome battle. How could I forget The Trollocs were just flailing everywhere, but it didn't phase the Modril. But when the wall of flame went up, that scared their horses, and they couldn't force them through. So it was again that pacing of one of her tricks destroyed the masses, but it couldn't destroy the snake of the head. So she literally wore herself out, and you're like, wow.
The snake of the head, yes.
Oh my goodness, the head is snake of the head. Oh, yes. Okay, so they are fleeing, and they make a decision to go to. They get into an argument. Lan and Moraine, whose relationship again is really, you see their kind of a stratagem and how they each have their own strengths, and they argue where to go next, and that is a big foreshadowing. They decide to go to this old city, which was an ally of Manetheren, and it's a ruined city, and we will find out next time on the Reign of Books podcast what that's all about. And that's where we conclude, John. It's a great beginning to the story, an exceptional beginning with a lot of high stakes and characters that are now kind of fleshed out, real characters that are the Wheel of Time, or are that's this. I know there's tons more down the road, but this is the group that's actually invested me, and I'm loving this. So great beginning to our entry into the Wheel of Time series.
Yes, and for anyone listening, please, we really want some interaction on this particular series, the Robert Jordan series, because we know how important this is to a lot of you out there. So please leave comments, leave questions, give us your thoughts on what we've discussed so far, and yeah, that's
Bring it. Tell us what we missed, and check us out on the reignofbooks.com. That's reign as in the rule or the supremacy of books. And you can find our Goodreads group on there, send in questions, and we are live every Saturday morning if you want to get up this early on a Saturday. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend, John. It's been a blast, man.
Same to you.